Hello, welcome to 12's Tea Time Chat. We have really exciting guest, Dr. Anne Baliey, right? Did I say right?
That's me, yes.
Yeah, I've been following her work. I recently read her really fascinating paper, and I just contacted her out of nowhere, I'm sure, and asking for other articles, and I've been following her Twitters. So actually, my pandemic hobby has been following her Twitter, because she's been posting so many interesting, fascinating stories and articles and on her experiences on pilgrimage as well. So I'm so happy she's here, and thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's lovely to see you after, after sort of seeing you on Twitter for so long. I can see your face at last. It's lovely.
Right. And do you have a tea in your hand?
I do. I don't know if you can see this. I have a very special mug here. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's a little bit lower, maybe.
It says the Shrine of Stridesride on it. And since Stridesride is the patron saint of Oxford, and she has a shrine at Oxford Cathedral at Christchurch, and I recently went on the pilgrimage there, and I purchased my mug afterwards. So that's my souvenir, and I'm actually drinking tea from it at the moment. Oh. So cheers!
It's just perfect timing. Thanks for sharing that with us. By the way, for the audience, because most of my audience are tourism studies scholars, Anne is in medieval studies, and she works for Oxford University here in England. I mean, not here, I mean Wales. but I wish we could meet for tea time in person, because we're only 4 or 5 hours away. Is it?
Something like that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Maybe in the future, right? So, and here's my first question. So how did you, and why did you start studying pilgrimage, and what's your primary research?
Ah, well, that goes back a long way, actually. In my late 20s and 30s, I was very interested in travel. So I did a lot of backpacking around Africa and India and Europe and a little bit in South America. And at the time, it didn't occur to me that it was anything like a pilgrimage. I didn't know much about pilgrimage. But now looking at the research that people have done on the Camino de Santiago, this is the walk across the northern Spain, the Camino Francis, for example, is 500 miles. And I realized that the things that people were saying about it and the sort of experiences they had were very similar to what I've experienced backpacking, especially through Africa. For example, people used to go on a backpacking trail, so everybody had the same routes. We used to meet up with the same backpackers, stay in the same hostels. We all had the Lonely Planet that we sort of worked out our route from. And there's also this sort of strong feeling of fellowship with other backpackers. And people were also backpacking at the time when I was going for very many similar reasons as people go on the Camino today. For example, after a divorce or in between jobs, people were going backpacking after retirement sometimes, or after a life crisis, and these sort of things that people on the Camino today are talking about. That was very much my experience of being a backpacker. And of course, the idea of the liminality, of being away from the normal everyday world, was very much there as well. When I was backpacking, there was no mobile phones or internet, so my only contact with home was every 3 months or so, when I used to pick up letters from the nearest city for post restaurant. So it's very much what people are experiencing now in pilgrimage, and I was doing it, backpacking, but it never occurred to me that it was a pilgrimage. And my other interest is long distance walking, of course, hiking, which is much more much closer to pilgrimage, because walking pilgrimages, are very popular at the moment. So I did a lot of long distance hikes in the 1990s, including South Downs Way, Cotswolds Way was another favourite. I spent several summers doing many of these, but I think perhaps the most interesting one is the Pilgrim's Way. So this is a route from from Winchester to Canterbury. At the time when I was doing it, it wasn't considered a pilgrimage in the here and now, because in the 1990s, people didn't really go on pilgrimage, you know, unless they were very religious. So it was a heritage trail. But since that time, it's really been interesting to see the development of it into something that people do now. They go on pilgrimage, and Canterbury Cathedral's got very much involved in promoting it as a pilgrimage. So this is really fascinating for me. And then these kind of interests came together when I did medieval studies. One of my courses at Bristol University was a course on travel and travel literature and pilgrimage. And at the time I took it because I was so interested in travel, I didn't really think about the pilgrimage aspect of it. And then I sort of got to know about this really wonderful text called Miracle Stories. And these were texts that were written and produced by cult centres, and they involved people, men, women and children, going to local shrines to be healed of their illnesses or other things. And what fascinated me about it was because the ones that I was looking at in the 12th century, you just had a glimpse of ordinary people, of ordinary men and women, you know, sort of peasants, sort of local people that didn't appear in any other sources. So that's how I got into the pilgrimage as an academic, really. It just sort of went on from there. I did my PhD a lot later on female pilgrims in 12th century England, looking at the same sources. So that's how it all came about.
It's really fascinating. Actually, I almost not cry, but I was so struck by this quote from your article, "The problematic pilgrim, rethinking Marjorie's pilgrim."
Oh, Marjorie Kemp, yeah.
That's this. I just have this line with me. Actually, it highlights a fundamental methodological issue recognized in the field of pilgrim studies. Namely, the pilgrimage is an essentializing term that Western scholars often employ somewhat loosely without giving much consideration to the cultural context to which it is applied. Oh my God, I direct quoted this in my article. And actually, this kind of captures what you experienced and said, right? The backpacking and, you know, what is a pilgrimage? It's all kind of, right?
Especially today, because what we think about a pilgrimage today, you know, today we tend to think of walking pilgrimages, people doing it for health reasons, for physical and emotional benefits, and as a kind of slow tourism. It's also popular because it's a sort of green type of tourism and very environmentally friendly. But none of these things, of course, were relevant in the Middle Ages. So it's a very different kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, especially coming from tourism management perspective. You know, your studies and theories and articles are really a little bit different. So it's been just fascinating to me. But Anne, as a pilgrimage researcher, what would you say what has been the most interesting phenomenon around pilgrimage in during COVID time?
Oh, well, there are a couple actually that I can think of. The most obvious is virtual pilgrimage, because of course the shrines have been shut, so people can't go to their usual places of pilgrimage, and travel has been restricted. So a lot of annual pilgrimages have simply gone online. So they've been live streamed to people's homes, so they can just sit there from the home and go on a kind of virtual pilgrimage. And one of the most striking example is Lourdes. Now, Our Lady of Lourdes in France is an apparition site, which you probably know about. It's one of the most famous ones in Europe, and it usually has millions and millions of visitors and pilgrims each year. But of course it was shut, so what do? So they decided to live stream their event in July 2020, and apparently they had 80 million viewers.
Oh
So
wow.
I mean, obviously you have a wide audience if it's
Wow.
virtual, because you can connect with people all over the world. But also smaller pilgrimages were also doing the same thing. I was supposed to go on a pilgrimage in a very local one in Essex, Bradwell-on-Sea. and it was actually cancelled at the last minute. But what they did instead was to do a virtual event. It wasn't a live streaming. They had a compilation of different hymns and prayers and historical footage of previous pilgrimage, and they could have kind of put this together as a compilation, and you could find that on YouTube and go on the virtual pilgrimage. So that's the most striking thing that I've noticed about the pandemic. But also, of course, people have been going on local mini pilgrimages as well, and going on walking pilgrimages. They can't go to places like Lourdes or overseas to pilgrimages, so they're going on pilgrimages close to home. And one thing that's really interesting from someone that lives in the UK is seeing how this has fed into what we call a lockdown walk. So people were going on lockdown walks because they were obviously constricted to their locality, to their area. And it was very much promoted, the lockdown walk, as something that was beneficial to your mental and physical health when you couldn't go out and do anything else. And this in turn became, people were going out on these lockdown walks, and these became sort of almost spiritual with people. You know, they were seeing them as, a lot of people were seeing them as almost mini pilgrimages. It was this kind of mindful experience and a way to get rid of lockdown stress and anxiety. And so this in a way is fed into what was already there, which was a trend to going on short walking pilgrimages. So really, I suppose those are the two things that have struck me most.
I would definitely agree. Actually, for the mini pilgrimage, I've done this since we had the lockdown from last year. I cannot imagine how I would survive without it. That was so spiritual and so therapeutic. So I cannot not do it every day. I couldn't not do it. So I think that was really, really important for me and for my mental well-being. Otherwise, I would go crazy. And
also when I was out about in my village, and my family home was in Wiltshire, and I was meeting people from the village that had been living there for 20 years and had never been walking outside their front door. So they weren't aware. They weren't aware of their environment, and they were discovering for the first time, places around them, and they were seeing that as a kind of local pilgrimage. So all this is just very interesting, the way that it all kind of wraps up together.
Yeah, that's also interesting. I had a really long walking route in front of our house when I used to live in Bournemouth, and I didn't know we had a park, and I didn't know we had such a long walking route. It was 5 minutes from my house. I was like, I've been living here for 5 years, and what is this? It's so beautiful. And everybody many people walking, and we would say hi and have a small chat, and I never spoke to my neighbor ever for 5 years, and there was the kind of first time people chatting, and so it was interesting. Definitely. And quite therapeutic.
And a very kind of local experience, which in normal times you wouldn't have, would you? You go on holiday to somewhere, far away. You wouldn't think of staying at home and exploring the places close to home.
Yeah, so I think even in the post-COVID time, I think I'll keep doing this, going for a long walk and, the mini pilgrimage. So I think I got into this habit. I don't know, you think people will keep doing this?
I think they will, because people were really discovering walking anyway during lockdown, and I think a lot of it will continue. Well, of course, in many ways, of course, this is also a continuation from before the pandemic, because walking pilgrimages, especially in the UK, were already becoming very popular. So in a way, it's just a continuation, but perhaps it's been kind of accelerated by the pandemic, I think.
Definitely. And do you think there are any new forms of pilgrimage during the pandemic, except the virtual and mini pilgrimage? Any other kind of new pilgrimage popping up, or new kind of more secular pilgrimage? We talked about backpacking and things, but do you think it's becoming less religious and more secular?
Well, yes, but I think this has been happening well before the pandemic. At least for the last 10 years, it's become very secularized. And I think there are several reasons for this. One is because people, there's a sociologist called Grace Davey, and one of her explanations for the popularity of pilgrimage at the moment, which I really like, is that people are now no longer religiously literate. So to them, they don't understand, they haven't been brought up thinking that pilgrimage is a religious thing. And if they've been brought up in a Protestant country, they haven't been brought up thinking that it's something that's bad and negative because Catholics do it. So people are coming to pilgrimage now with a completely different mindset, a really open mindset. When I was, in the 1990s, when I was walking the Pilgrim's Way, as I was mentioning, it never occurred to me that it was a pilgrimage, because this is something that religious people did, or Catholics did, or people in the Middle Ages. It wasn't something you did today. But now it's much more opened up and become much more secular. And there are also people that are promoting this. I mean, the Anglican Church is particularly promoting pilgrimage at the moment to their medieval shrines and their cathedrals. And this is amazing to me, because after the Reformation, pilgrimage was banned. So you wouldn't go on pilgrimage for very many centuries. But now, for example, this shrine, Fried's Wide Shrine in Oxford. When I first came to Oxford 10 years ago, the shrine was basically, or the shrine base, what's left of it, was just a historical oddity, really. It was a monument. It was historical. People didn't see it as a working everyday shrine. You didn't go there to worship. But since that time, it's now become a shrine that people go and light candles beside. There's the votive candle holder. There's a statue of the saint close to it. The subdean goes and prays at the shrine every morning. So this is just a totally new thing. It's just happened so quickly. But and on the other side, you have people like the British Pilgrimage Trust. Now, this is have you probably heard of them? They're a charitable organisation, but they run guided walking pilgrimage tours, and they're very much of the mindset that anybody can go on pilgrimage. They say it's for all faiths and none, and they have this motto: bring your own faith. So again, that's a kind of really kind of secularized perspective of pilgrimage. So for all these different reasons, I think so many more people are going on pilgrimage now. And of course, walking pilgrimage also very much connects with our moral values today, as I was saying earlier, sort of green pilgrimage and sustainable tourism, slow tourism, because you're not harming the environment and you're immersing yourself in the places where you are. For health reasons, physical, and of course for spiritual and for emotional reasons as well. So all these things kind of gel together to make pilgrimage very much more popular. But it's nothing that's happened particularly in the last 2 years. This has been gradually happening, and it was happening before COVID. I think COVID probably stopped a lot of things, like there were quite a few new pilgrimage trails that were supposed to have opened just before pilgrimage, just before the pandemic. And now, there have been about 8 new pilgrimage trails in the UK that have opened in the summer, have been inaugurated. So, yeah. So in answer to your question, then, I don't think it's in the last 2 years during the pandemic. I think it's been a larger development.
That's very true. Even before pandemic started, actually South Koreans started going to Santiago, and obviously they're not Catholic, but these non-religious South Koreans were going to Santiago between jobs, young people, and their travel agencies having package tour programs for it, and people would go for a package tour, which sounds not very spiritual or religious, but that was actually a thing in 2019. And it doesn't seem to be new because of COVID, but but I think that COVID has really heralded things on a bit, especially with virtual pilgrimage. And now I can imagine that from now on, shrines will take up the virtual option as well as having on-site pilgrimages, because you can just attract such a wider audience. And of course, there are people who can't get to the shrine and would like to. So, people with mobility issues, or people who are unwell, and things like that. So it's a great resource, really. Definitely. Yeah, my mom would appreciate it, because she has a little bit of a health issue and she cannot go on interesting pilgrimage. She really wants to go Santiago, but she doesn't have the physical ability, but she can go on virtual tour. So I think it's really a positive thing for her, right?
There are sort of apps and things now. You can do the virtual community.
And she doesn't have to stay in a hostel she doesn't like, you know. Right. So yeah, definitely. Do you think it would last the virtual pilgrimage thing after the post-pandemic time?
Yeah, I really imagine it will, actually, because as I was saying, you can draw in so many more people, and it's not that difficult to do. I mean, places like Lourdes that I mentioned, they already had a virtual kind of pilgrimage because they had something called Lourdes TV, and they live streamed a lot of their services, and you had this facility where you could post through your computer prayers and light candles and things like that. So it's something that was already happening, and I just think, you know, after COVID, people realised what a kind of wonderful asset it is to be able to live stream things and gain a global audience. So you can't do that if you're just limited to on-site visitors.
That's true. And I know there are so many reasons to the pilgrimage works, but do you think, I mean, during this time, also people or after, the people's kind of primary motivation is for like healing, coping with their issues, problems, and stress?
I have difficulties of motivation.
Because everybody has different reasons, yeah.
Because if you ask people their motivations, they're most likely to give you, you know, several answers, or give you the answer that they think that you want to hear. So it's very difficult to say. I can imagine that after COVID, there are a lot of people who are distressed in various ways, who are grieving, who found a lot of comfort in pilgrimage. Yes, but this is just speculative. So I've never, I haven't talked to anybody and particularly asked them
what's your motivation.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of pilgrims, but
that's true. And have you done your own pilgrimage during the COVID time?
So I've kind of done two types of pilgrimages over COVID. The first type is visiting shrines. So I've visited churches and holy wells. A lot of people are interested in holy wells at the moment, and they're such beautiful, beautiful places. Over COVID, they can be quite difficult. Holy wells are fine because most of them are outside, so they're not restricted. But a lot of churches were closed, so that wasn't so good. One of the most interesting ones I went to was a Catholic shrine called Ladywell, which is near Preston up in Lancashire. So that, as I said, this is a Catholic pilgrimage site. It's not well known outside Catholic circles, but they have the holy well, the holy water and the spring in the grounds, and they have stations of the cross in the grounds as well. So that was all open to the public. But what I was really interested in is, as a medievalist, they had a relic of Thomas Becket, the 12th century archbishop who was murdered in his cathedral. But this is located in the house. So I went into the house, and I was told by the manager there that tourists weren't allowed, or visitors, or even pilgrims. No members of the public were allowed into the relic room, which was upstairs. But I was actually quite lucky because I was there whilst the priest came, and and I asked him very politely and explained who I was. And I was a medievalist, and I had a private tour of the relic room upstairs. And this was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Living in England, you don't get to see many relics. And I went up into this locked room, and there were relics everywhere. They were kept in wooden cupboards with glass cabinet doors. They were literally all around the walls, and then there were cabinets on the floor as well. And there were just hundreds. I've never seen anything like it. There were some quite famous ones as well, as well as Thomas Becket. There were relics of Edmund Campion and Thomas More and Margaret Clitheroe. So these are people I've heard of. Most of the relics there, the martyrs I hadn't heard of at all. But anyway, that was just, sorry, that was a bit of a diversion, but that was just one of my favourite places. And then the other type of pilgrimage I went on was walking pilgrimages. I participated in about 6 of those over this last summer, I think, because of course walking pilgrimages are fine as far as COVID is concerned, because you're outside, although the numbers were limited to 25 for one of those that I went on. So yeah, so one of the most interesting ones, the walking pilgrimages I went on, and was a Dominican one, and it was a Dominican anniversary pilgrimage. It was the anniversary of when the Dominicans first arrived in England in 1221, and there were four Dominicans were walking from Ramsgate to Oxford, in the footsteps of where the original Dominicans would have come. So I walked the last leg of the Dominicans, and all I can say is that Dominicans walk very, very fast, and they don't stop for lunch. I'm a fast walker myself, and I've done lots of walking, but I was really pretty exhausted by going on that.
But they don't have a lunch?
No, they didn't even stop for lunch. We stopped for a couple of snacks, and at one point I had to go to the loo. So I stopped off at the toilet, and by the time I came out again, not only were they in the distance, but I didn't catch up with them until they arrived back in Oxford. So that was quite a memorable one, actually.
Oh, that's really interesting. Maybe people from different cultures, walk differently and do differently around same pilgrimage site, right?
Well, if you're walking in a group, you normally go as fast as the slowest person because you don't want the group dispersed. But I mean, these Dominicans, they had to get to Christ Church Cathedral for a certain time, so that was why they were walking so fast. But yeah, it was just as well that the pilgrims were all pretty fit and could keep up. But these Dominicans, they've been walking since Ramsgate. I think it was about 10 days or so. So they must have been quite tired themselves, I think.
Wow, impressive. Something to research about. Actually, this reminds me of a funny story. The South Koreans going to Santiago, I heard they get complaints a lot from other European pilgrims or walkers, because the Koreans, when they arrive back in hostel at night, they start doing barbecuing together. Yeah. And then, it smells. They usually do pork barbecue, and they drink Korean alcoholic drinks like soju. So I think it bothers the European people in hostels, and it was a big article about it. So I think people from different cultures behave very differently, right? It's interesting.
Well, I've had that particularly when I was backpacking. Different people from different nationalities would behave in one way, and other people were behaving in another way, and it didn't always go down very well.
That's really interesting too, right? And I know you've been doing research on pilgrimage in the UK. Would you like to tell us what you're researching, or is it a secret yet?
Well, basically what I'm doing at the moment, because I've been teaching at Oxford's Department for Continuing Education, and I've been teaching courses on medieval and contemporary pilgrimage. So my idea at the moment is to combine medieval and contemporary pilgrimage and write a book combining the two, because there are so many, so there are so many links between the two. There are so many differences, but of course there are lots of continues as well. So I'd like to basically perform my research for the last 20 years into a book and get it down in that way for something a bit different. I'm so used to writing articles, and I haven't actually got around to writing a book yet. So I think that's probably the way to go.
Yeah. So when you have your book, you should come back to our tea time chat again. And
yeah, it might be a while yet. I have to say.
Right? And it's been really fascinating talking to you, and it's just really, really interesting what you're doing for your research. And I invited you for a reason, because most of the audience are tourism studies people, and we don't really think about medieval historians or medieval study people studying pilgrimage, because we go to geography or anthropology or tourism studies for researching for literature. And I found your article, and there's another article, and all really fascinating, and it's really, really useful and helpful for our research as well. So I think more tourism scholars and geographers or anthropologists who's doing pilgrimage studies should read your work, and they should expand their literature searching review. That's why I invited you, and this was really fun and perfect. And speaking of that, I know our mutual friend Heather, who's a psychologist and who was on this tea time chat, couple of weeks ago, she's organizing a fascinating book, Multidisciplinary Perspectives of Pilgrimage. And she's doing that, right? She's having all these different chapters from different disciplines. I'm having tourism chapter. I know you're writing a chapter on
medieval pilgrimage.
medieval
methodology, yes.
Yeah, and I have other friends doing, Michael's doing anthropology, Daniel's doing geography, and Joey's doing environmental studies. So it'll be really interesting to see what kind of, disciplines are out there around the pilgrimage. And
yeah. I also think it's very important for medievalists to study tourism studies as well, and what you're doing. So I think this combination, interdisciplinary studies and is definitely the way to go, because we learn so much from one another.
Definitely. So I feel like I found some gold when I found your article. What is this?
Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
Hopefully
we know about Marjorie Kemp.
Oh, I know Marjorie Kemp. Fascinating. Oh my God. I never just had that kind of perspective about pilgrimage in medieval time and female pilgrims, and just all different angles and definitions about pilgrims and pilgrimage. And yeah, it's a really interesting piece. But this was really fun and enjoyable. Thank you so much for your time, Anne.
Well, thank you for your time as well. It's been lovely talking to you.
That's so nice to meet you. Hopefully we do tea time chat in person in the future.
Oh, that'd be lovely. I look forward to that.
Very nice. But thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.